Hi, it's Sandy Wyllie. Welcome to my mental health channel, 50 Shades of Black and White, where I talk about my own mental illness, borderline personality disorder. I talk about a lot of other mental health illnesses, um, such as schizophrenia, bipolar, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety attacks. But I'm here as a patient trying to wipe away the stigma of mental illness, bring it out in the open by talking about my experiences and thoughts and opinions as a patient. I am not a therapist. I do not hold a degree in psychology. And I only come on as a person who has, lived with mental illness all my life. And I just come on as that. So I cannot offer you any professional opinions because I am not a therapist. I just want to make that really clear. So if you're new to my channel, welcome. Please subscribe. It's totally free. And if you like what you see, give it a thumbs up. But there's just only one thing I ask of you. Please be kind to me and everyone else in the comments. Today, I'm going to try to describe my bizarre story of being in 3 therapies. 3 very different abusive, explosive, exploitive, sexually abusive, physically abusive therapies with 3 different psychologists at once. These are my books. Love Bombed. No, this one is Love Outside the Boundaries. Sorry. This is Love Bombed with the big A bomb. Love Bombed by a Harvard psychologist, sexually exploited by 3 psychologists, and emails of an unethical psychologist. In the emails, this is all the emails, I copied and pasted from the psychologist I had sex with for 2 years, who sexually, verbally, psychologically, and physically abused me. Dr. James Barbaria. Those are all his private emails. There's like hundreds of them in this book. This book is like almost over 200 pages. This book, Love Bombed by a Harvard psychologist, has all the emails of the Harvard psychologist I was seeing for 16 years. He was his patient. We were both seeing him. It's a very long, complicated story, but I want to get this out there so bad, and I've been trying in different videos to explain it, how I was seeing 3 psychologists and how they abused me. Let's just begin with the Harvard psychologist, Dr. Geist. I was seeing him for free. I saw him on and off for 16 years. When I was seeing him, I first started seeing him 5 hours a week, but then I got a job and other complications arose, which I don't want to get into. He pulled back on me. And I saw him less and less, so I was down to like a half an hour a week at that point. So I started seeing other therapists that took my insurance. And I started seeing Dr. James Barbaria. At the same time, I was seeing Dr. Richard Geist. Because I only was having a half an hour, a 30-minute session with Dr. Geist at that point. And I felt like I needed more therapy. So Dr. James Barbaria took my insurance. Now, I was initially in the therapy with Dr. Geist. I fell in love with him. He allowed me to sit in his lap. He laid with me on the floor. He invited me to his vacation home in Maine. We had a physical relationship, but it wasn't a sexual relationship. There was a lot of touching and feeling going on, but it did not lead to sex. But I did have sex with this psychologist. I'll get into that in a moment. So Dr. Geist was unethical. And then I started seeing Dr. James Barbaria, and I saw him for the standard 50-minute to an hour at first. And then it increased to 2 hours, and then it increased to 4 hours. But While I was seeing him, I was becoming attracted to him, and he was becoming attracted to me, which happens, and is very common to happen in therapy, but you just don't act on it. But these psychologists made me feel responsible for the sexual relationship, even though I could not give consent because I was the patient, they were the doctor, and it was an imbalance of power. But they brainwashed me into thinking that, I was responsible for it. Now, as I was getting attracted to Dr. James Barbaria, we had a lot in common. We were both Italian. We were both Catholic. He was very handsome. We both were very physically fit. We both had six packs, and we both lifted weights. He had, rippling biceps, jet black, gorgeous hair. He could have been a model if he was a few inches taller. He could have been a male model. He told me he was attracted to me. I said I was attracted to him, and I told this to Dr. Geist in therapy. Dr. Geist encouraged me to have a sexual relationship with my other psychologist, Dr. Barbaria. He told me, why don't you ask him to go upstairs and lie in his bed? Tell him it will be fun. He told me, ask him if he's in love with you. So the whole time I was with Dr. Geist, I was talking about my therapy with Dr. Barbaria, which became more and more and more unethical. In one session, he grabbed me and put me in his lap, and he put his tongue down my throat. This is when I was his patient. And meanwhile, Dr. Richard Geist was encouraging this. He encouraged it so much that Dr. James Barbaria and Dr. Richard Geist started seeing me together in the same session they both had home offices, okay? All the therapists I went to had their private practice in their own home. So, I went with Dr. James Barbaria to Dr. Richard Geist, and I had both of them together in the same room with me. Two of my psychologists in two separate therapies now, together in the same room. It gets even more bizarre than this. Are you following me so far? So, Dr. Richard Geist was encouraging us as a couple to have this sexual relationship. So he started dating me, Dr. James Barbaria, picking me up at my house while I was married, living in a 7-room ranch house with my son. He would pull up in his, convertible sports car, pick me up in front of my house, and my son would be asking, Mommy, why is your psychologist coming to the house and taking you away? I mean, it was bizarre. It was really bizarre, and it affected my family in just horrific ways that I can't really get into in this. It turned me into an alcoholic. I can tell you the damage he did to me. I started drinking vodka heavy every day. So he picked me up every Saturday night around 5. I wouldn't come home till after midnight. And meanwhile, they were seeing each other too. He would be seeing Dr. Richard Geist for individual therapy, and and I would go with him, both of us, to Dr. Geist. So 3 of us in the same room. Only now Dr. Geist was my couples counselor as well. And my other psychologist turned into my boyfriend who I was having sex with. Now there's a third psychologist in the mix, Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang from Yale. He too had a home office. Now, Dr. Richard Geist and Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang only lived like 10 minutes away from each other. They both lived in Newton. They both had home offices. They both were married. Dr. James Barbaria lived in Jamaica Plain. He was divorced. So I started going to Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang because now I wasn't paying any money to Dr. James Barbaria or Dr. Richard Geist. Those two are free. So now I had my insurance to go to someone, because insurance will only pay for one psychologist. Unless it's a psychiatrist you see like once a month who prescribes you medication, and then you have a psychologist for therapy. That's different. These were all psychologists. They were not psychiatrists. They could not write out prescriptions. I always mess that up. Prescriptions for medication. They could only do psychotherapy. So now I was seeing Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang, and I told him about Dr. Richard Geist, and I also told him about Dr. James Barbaria. So now he knew about him, and he wanted to see him. This is the third psychologist. So now I bring Dr. James Barbaria to my other psychologist, Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang, who lives 10 minutes from Dr. Richard Geist. I hope you aren't confused, because, see, I would be confused if I didn't know if I didn't live it. To follow the story is really, really bizarre. But I need to get it out there. I need to warn people about psychologists, how they can ruin your life. These were like professional psychologists. Duquesne University, a Catholic Holy Cross, Duquesne University, Harvard University. That's tops, right? Yale University. These were like, and these doctors were in their 60s, 70. Well, Dick was in his 70s, but yeah, and yeah, Jeffrey Fortgang was 70, and Jim and Dr. James Barbaria, he was 60. So these were people who had like 30, 40 years experience from Ivy League colleges. You know, they were doctors. So now I go to therapy and I bring Dr. James Barbaria to my sessions with Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang, who agreed to see us both for couples counseling when we were already seeing Dr. Richard Geist for individual and couples counseling. Do you understand the you know what this says? Sexually exploded by 3 psychologists. Do you understand the dynamic of what is going on here? Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang and Dr. Richard Geist were encouraging my sexual relationship with Dr. James Barbaria. They were having me bring him into my sessions so that I was in therapy, I was in the room, the office, with 3 psychologists. All my psychologists. I was in with Dr. Richard Geist, Dr. James Barbaria, and me. And then it would be Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang, Dr. James Barbaria, and me. I mean, it is totally bizarre and far out. I went to the licensing board with Dr. James Barbaria, and I also filed a lawsuit. I got a lawyer, and I got $80,000. I asked for $100,000, but you know, you never get all of what you ask. You know, we asked for $100,000 because, you know, my son was tormented and had a lot of problems I can't go into because of what happened. My husband did, I did. I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I have severe panic attacks. I have insomnia. I have alcoholism by these 3 psychologists. First of all, the psychologists should never, ever promote a sexual relationship. Dr. Richard Geist and Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang should have reported Dr. James Barbaria because he was having sex with his patient. But those 2 encouraged it. They encouraged the sexual relationship. So, they even, not just encouraged it, they, enforced it almost, by having me come in with the psychologist who's sexually abusing me. In half the states, if a psychologist has sex with a patient, they can go to jail. Okay, it's a felony. It's a major crime. It's like statutory rape. It's like incest. Why they compare it to incest is because, like a parent with, a child, you cannot give consent. Even though I did, I was an adult and I agreed to the sexual relationship, I could not really agree to it because I was a patient and he was a doctor. And because of that power difference, I could not give consent. And these other two psychologists who were encouraging that relationship should have had their license revoked. Now, I am also, for the past year, filed a complaint with the licensing board in my state, Massachusetts, against Dr. Richard Geis. It has been investigated, and the board has reviewed it, and it's still an open case, which means they have not solved it yet. What happened to Dr. James Barbaria is he died before there was a trial. There was going to be a trial, but he died at 62 from the stress of it all. He just collapsed of a major heart attack at 62. And this man was physically fit. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. He worked out. I mean, he was physically, his body was, like I said, he was like a model. He had a six-pack. He had rippling biceps. He was like a model, and he just collapsed. So it never went to trial. So he died. All his patients have no idea that he was unethical because he died before the board, before there was a trial where they would, take away, suspend, revoke his license. But he didn't die before my lawyer got at him and he paid me for all the damages he did to me and my family, which resulted in $80,000 cash. But it doesn't matter the money because I'm still, totally, my life is, and my family's life has been ruined over this. So this is what I want to warn people about. This is what, I wrote all these books. This is my relationship with him, with me and Dr. James Barbaria. This is a painting. I use this painting because the man in this painting, it's a painting, looks just like Dr. James Barbaria. I've written this one. These are all his emails. It's a book of all his emails. I copied and pasted over the course of 4 years of our unethical sexual relationship. I mean, this man, pushed me around. He spit in my face. He swore at me. It wasn't just, the sexual unethical part of it. This man was physically violent to me and verbally violent to me and emotionally violent. He told me that him and Dr. Richard Geis, the Harvard one, love bombed by a Harvard psychologist, they both told me that if I ever went to the licensing board, I could never do that because it would destroy Dr. James Barbaria's life. They tried to tell me that I was responsible for what happened, that I could never go to the licensing board because I would destroy his life. I would destroy his patients' lives. This book explains about all the therapies between, all the unethical. This has Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang in it too, Dr. James Barbaria, and Dr. Richard Geis. Now, they made me the victim. They try to brainwash me into being silent and to not speaking, to keep. So they would come out smelling like roses. And now I want to, after I got away from all therapists, I haven't been in any therapy for 2.5 years. I never will ever go to therapy again. It destroyed my life. Therapy has ruined my life. It ruined my family's life. It ruined my husband's life. It ruined my son's life. It ruined my life completely. I was a broken person. Now I'm a shattered person. It's like a vase. You can break a vase into 2 pieces. Sometimes you can break a vase into 3 pieces, and you can glue those 2 or 3 pieces back together. But if you shatter a vase into thousands of pieces, I mean completely shatter it, there's no way that you can pick up glue a shattered vase, shattered into hundreds and thousands of pieces back together. If it's broken into 2 or 3 pieces, you can glue those 2 pieces together and still have it intact. You see, I was broken before I went to these psychologists. Now I'm shattered. So I might look good to you on the outside, okay? But on the inside, I'm shattered. My spirit is shattered. I don't trust anyone. I've lost trust in everyone. I don't have any friends, and I never will have a friend. I will never trust another soul again because of these doctors. I don't see any doctors. I don't go for medical appointments. Nothing. I'm a shattered person. They broke my spirit. Do you know what it means for your spirit to be broken? I mean, you could have a broken arm or even lose your limb. I could lose my arm, I could lose my leg, but when you lose your spirit, you know, you've lost everything. That is a shattered person, you know. You can even have a broken heart, okay, but a shattered person who's lost their spirit has lost everything. And I've lost everything over these 3 psychologists. And I never went to the board over Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang because I ended the relationship with Dr. Richard Geist, and so we never did go for the couples counseling that he was offering because I ended it and I got a lawyer and I went to the licensing board. There are licensing boards in every state. So please, if you feel that your therapist has harmed you or is unethical, please report them to your licensing board in your state. I just wanted to get this message out there and let people know why I'm against therapy. I'm not telling people not to go to therapy. I want to make that clear. I'm just telling you I would never do it again. It destroyed my life. I don't want to tell people what to do, but I went to several different psychologists, and these psychologists are all out, they're all out for money. They're all out to protect themselves and to protect each other. Then they do not care about patients. Because if they cared about me, those 2, Dr. Richard Geist and Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang, would have reported Dr. James Barbaria for being unethical. They didn't report him. They supported him. I went with him and saw these psychologists together in sessions. So all 3 of us were in the same session. Do you understand that? Do you understand how bizarre that is? That they encouraged it, they egged it on. So I hope you buy the books, because in these books I talk much more graphically than I ever could here on YouTube. They're not that much money at all. Some of them are only a couple of dollars on Kindle. But so that's the short version of my story, and my spirit has been shattered, and I just don't want to see that happen to anyone else, because we are very vulnerable when we put our trust into these therapists, and this is exactly what can happen. Okay.